morning, my friends, and welcome to another fantastic installment. From very high above all the insipid and odious forms of Wyoming mainstream media, this is Cowboy State Politics. I, of course, am your illustrious host, David Iverson, firmly ensconced behind the silver Cowboy State Politics microphone and broadcasting to you from the base of the bighorns at the Cowboy State Politics studio in Sheridan, Wyoming. Good morning, my friends, and welcome to the program. Happy Monday. I and the lovely Christine are still over in Sturgis. I say still, we only got there yesterday, but we're going to stay another night, and if all goes well, we'll be attending the Tesla concert tonight. I've always loved their cover of the song Signs, and so I'm really hoping that we get to watch the concert tonight. It'd be a lot of fun. On Weekend Update, I told you the story of the foul-mouthed chairman, Senator Jim Anderson, in the Minerals Committee meeting. He also let Senator Ogden Driscoll, ol' Augie, get away with a whole bunch. Essentially, what Augie was saying is, it doesn't really matter what the Freedom Caucus is saying, it's all lies, and they're just trying to kill this bill. Neither of those two things are true. If the bill worked out to be beneficial for the state of Wyoming, and if all of their questions were answered, and this actually was a good opportunity for the state and was not just creating a nuclear waste dump. And really, I think the truth of all of it is probably somewhere in the middle. Early last week, I recorded a roundtable discussion between Chairman of Appropriations John Baer, his Vice Chairman, Agent 29, Chairman of the House Minerals Committee, Christopher Knapp, and Representative Bill Allemand. I hadn't really intended on playing it for you on the podcast, but given everything that happened last week with the Minerals Committee and with the Weekend Update episode, I thought it would probably be good for you to listen to it. On Weekend Update, I played a soundbite for you from Senator Ogden Driscoll accusing Representative Chris Knapp of lying. Of course, he used different words, but that's what Augie meant. I can only assume that what Ogden was referring to is this roundtable discussion in which Representative Knapp lays out some genuine concerns about all of these nuclear companies wanting to move to Wyoming. We started out the discussion talking about a reference to the Freedom Caucus in a Cow Pie article written by Claire McFarland, in which she refers to the Freedom Caucus as, quote, the new right. So we have a quick discussion about that, and then we move into some questions about all this nuclear energy and the bill that was being discussed in the Minerals Committee. I guess it's still being discussed in Minerals. They just tabled it until the next meeting. So, because I'm out of town still, and you haven't heard this before, or unless you listen to the live program, you haven't heard this before, but here's the roundtable discussion between Agent 29, Representative John Baer, Representative Chris Knapp, and Representative Bill Allemand. There was a recent piece in the Cowboy State Daily that attempted to categorize or characterize the Wyoming Freedom Caucus as the new right. And the piece, I think, personally, it was just nothing more than a bunch of political drivel. They went to the Libertarian Party of Wyoming as evidence of, to use in the piece. So I thought that we'd take some time and talk to some members of the Wyoming Freedom Caucus about what the term new right means and what it is that the Wyoming Freedom Caucus does believe. So joining me on the program is Representative Bill Allemand, Representative John Baer, and Representative Chris Knapp, and of course, Agent 29. Guys, welcome to the program.
Thank you for having us.
I guess where I'd like to start is with you, Chairman Baer, and why don't you just first give me your gut level reaction of the piece that was in the Cowboy State Daily?
Well, my gut reaction is it's very heavily editorialized, which not surprised by that coming from the Cowboy State Daily. But the claim that we are the new right is a new one. I remember about 18 months ago, they changed from calling us the far right to calling us the further right. And I guess that was their effort to get more viewership or followers, because they realized the more they attack us, the more it hurts their own reputation, because we do really identify with the people of Wyoming more so probably than the media, based on their approval ratings, the media that is. And so I was not shocked that it was editorialized. You asked the question, what is the new right? And I think that the most common definition or understanding of that term out there today is that it's basically the far left coming all the way around and calling themselves the right, and they're the new right. And by that I mean they're anti-capitalists, which I use the term they are because I don't believe that should include us being the Wyoming Freedom Caucus. So I'll let others opine on that if you'd like, but I have much more to say about the new right and where the Wyoming Freedom Caucus really is.
All right, we'll just pause for just a second. There's a couple of different pieces that are there's a particularly good editorial by John Stossel, and he discusses why the new right is pretty much anti-capitalist. So let me just take a minute or two and explain exactly what he means by the new right. We're seeing an interesting phenomenon in conservative circles that folks like Tucker Carlson, Marjorie Taylor Greene, there's a few others, have attempted to claim that, and I guess they have claimed, they haven't attempted to claim, that, America first means only America. There's a group of them that are extraordinarily anti-Israel, and there, as Chairman Bear said, there's a bunch of them that are anti-capitalist. And, there's a number of different articles that are out. There was one in the Free Press that was fairly interesting. It was written by kind of a leftist, but I'll go ahead and post both of those at cowboystatepolitics.com. So if you want to check out what this term, the new right, is, you can do that. But I'd like to give you have an opportunity to either Representative Allemand or Representative Knapp to give us your thoughts. Let's start with Representative Knapp.
Yeah, I think with the press, this is nothing new to me. It's a continuance of trying to divide people and put a class of people into something that can be demonized. So whether we were far right, MAGA, what they used to say of Tea Party, their goal is to treat you as the minority, when actually we're the majority. To me, all we are is freedom-loving, principled people who work for transparency and work for the general welfare of Wyoming and its citizens. And to label us with anything, they're going to continue to do that till the end of time. It'll be far right, radical right, every term that they come up with to try to make us seem like we're not of the norm.
Well, and it's interesting. They come up with terms like hard right, far right, further right, but you never hear them say hard left or extreme left or anything like that. If they're talking about somebody on the Wyoming left, they're always moderates. Chairman Bear?
Yeah, thank you for coming back to me. I just wanted to point out something that they use as a pejorative. They call us populists. And I do believe that there is a lot of the understanding of what a populist is that does apply to the Wyoming Freedom Caucus, because we do represent the vast majority, as Chris was saying. But I would also add a caveat that I think for most of us, we are constitutionalists first before we're populists. And so we would never let the population drive us against the original Constitution and Bill of Rights that we've sworn an oath to and that I frankly love. So I just wanted to add that little comment in there that they're I agree with Chris. They're never short of pejoratives for us.
Well, and the term populist is interesting anyway, simply because it is meant as a pejorative. And I think that a lot of it goes back to being able to convince a crowd of just about anything. It goes back to the principle of yelling fire in a crowded theater, which, by the way, you do have the right to scream fire in a crowded theater. But it's the ability to entice a crowd and to appeal to, more populist ideas. But when we look at President Trump, I mean, the left tries to label him as a populist. And, he got elected overwhelmingly. Let's take a quick break, and when we come back, we'll finish up the roundtable discussion with the Freedom Caucus fellas. Today's installment of Cowboy State Politics is brought to you by Rebecca Bextel at eXp Realty. Are you one of these people suffering from Trump derangement syndrome and you've really just had enough winning for one lifetime? Have you decided that you can't take it anymore and you've got to get the heck out of Dodge? Well, if you have, you're going to need a real estate agent that you can trust. Now, that agent is Rebecca Bextel at eXp Realty. Her phone number is 307-699-3519. She's got her fingers on the pulse of the real estate market all across the state of Wyoming, and she can definitely help you with those foreign living dreams. She'll put some red-blooded, freedom-loving American in the house that you no longer want. Again, her phone number is 307-699-3519.
Here at U.S. Coin Capital, we hear from Americans across the United States who have a growing concern about the future purchasing power of U.S. paper money. Many Americans are looking for an alternative for long-term capital. For more than 35 years, the people at U.S. Coin Capital have educated American investors on how to properly accumulate United States gold and silver coins. Call us at 1-800-878-2646 or visit us on the web, uscoincapital.com.
If you've been thinking about a new building for your property, the two guys you should call first are Nick and Jesse at Morton Buildings. Their phone number is 307-674-2532. They're the experts in metal building construction. They've been doing it longer than anybody else around, and they do a much better job. So it doesn't matter whether it's a garage or a barn or a roping arena or even a gigantic warehouse, Nick and Jesse are the two guys you need to call. Again, their phone number is 307-674-2532, or you can check them out at their website, mortonbuildings.com. And now, back to the program. Now, Representative Allemand, you kind of drew most of the ire from the Cowboy State Daily. What's your thoughts on this?
Well, I think they just look at names to disparage us. And I think when we look at new right, I think that's very wrong. I think we should be called the old right because we're the constitutionalists.
Now we're adding
we
terms.
are the ones that's following our founding fathers. We're the ones who want industry coming in and want development. What we don't want in this case, and that's why we're being called the new right, is we do not want nuclear storage in Wyoming. But I would be more happy with the conversation saying we're the old right.
Well, it's interesting because, a big fan of Barry Goldwater is our pal Agent 29. And
before he went crazy.
Yeah, before he went crazy. But the term new right actually started with Barry Goldwater and William F. Buckley. And it was their devotion to conservative principles that people started labeling them. And I think that they kind of accepted the moniker, the new right, as opposed to the establishment Republicans that we have a big problem with right now. Ken?
Yeah, I think part of the problem and part of what Claire, I believe, is trying to do is to paint us with a broad brush and use a term that has several connotations to it. It also has denotations. And some of the denotations of this near right term have to do with racism.
A lot of them do, yeah.
Yeah, they refer to, white Christian. And when they mean Christian, from what I've read, they're not necessarily talking about the evangelical type Christian. They're talking about the traditional, perhaps Catholic, but not just them, traditional beliefs, which have long had some issues to a lot of folks. So this is an attempt to, whenever we say something, then they immediately are able to categorize us and kind of discard us, put us on a shelf and say, don't worry about that. These are just a bunch of racist old white people. So we don't really want that old in there, Bill, as much as I respect the idea.
All right, let's go back to Chairman Bear. I know you had some more thoughts on this.
I do. Thank you. Thank you, David. First, I'll address what Bill was saying about capitalism before I go on to the racism. But I agree that we don't want the nuclear waste coming here, at least without, some level of confidence that it's going to be safe and effective, the storage. And we're talking about the same people that told us that a experimental vaccine was safe and effective. We found that not to be true. So I'm a little bit leery of bringing it in. I don't know how successful we're going to be at pushing back on that, because if you look at the Texas case, the federal government is really preparing to shove this down somebody's throat. And with only 588,000 people in Wyoming, I think we're target number one for that. So it's going to probably take every Wyomingite to really push back on this if we want to avoid becoming the next waste dump site for nuclear waste. And I would say this, this is, there was a comment from the supposed Libertarian Party and their 5 followers that we were anti-capitalists, and maybe that's where her comment of new right comes from. But when you look at nuclear, it's the furthest thing from capitalism because of the regulation required to keep it safe. It is so regulated that it's expensive. And because it's expensive, it's not what the free market is going to choose for its energy source. That's going to be something that's both reliable and affordable, and that would be coal. And so also along these lines, we can take 3 examples from the current discussions in Wyoming about nuclear. We got TerraPower down in Kamloops. That experiment is 50% funded by the federal government. The other 50% is Bill Gates, who knows how to get federal funds. So it may be more than 50% funded by the federal government. Radiant, their first 5 years worth of customers are the federal government. All of the products they're going to produce are going to be for the federal government.
$1
at least for the
billion.
first 5 years of their product capabilities. And then BWXT, well, another nuclear company that cannot do anything without federal approval. So I would say that we're just the opposite by pumping the brakes on this nuclear discussion. We're just the opposite of anti-capitalist. We're anti-federal government growing in Wyoming.
Well, that's just the point that I was about to make, John, is that when you're talking about the free market, I mean, in all respects, you want as least government, the least amount of government involvement as possible. And when you have an industry like nuclear or solar panels or windmills that are heavily subsidized, I mean, it's the contradiction in their argument is baffling to me. That folks that are screaming about, oh, you're against the free market, you're against capitalism, are trying to support an industry that is almost entirely profitable only because of subsidies. And, one question that I haven't heard in this whole discussion, and well, I have heard it from you guys, is if this nuclear storage is so great and it's such a wonderful deal and it's going to provide all these opportunities and jobs for everybody, why aren't there any nuclear waste storage sites? Why aren't any other states running at this, trying to set one of these storage sites up? I mean, if it's so fantastic, you would think that everybody would be running for it. Now, interestingly enough, Representative Allemand, you did a poll, and it was brought up in both the Casper Star Tribune article, the Red Star, and it was mentioned in the Cow Pie. So why don't you just take a few minutes and tell us about that poll?
Okay, the poll was only 7-hour poll. It was started at 9:00 Thursday morning. I wanted the results for my town hall on Thursday afternoon. So they gave me the results at 2:30 on Thursday. And at that time they had 113 results, which is huge. And my key findings were people are somewhat aware of it coming in. 73% said they knew the state law, 25% said they didn't. Then when we look at supporting the storage of nuclear waste, my poll did not say in bar none, it said in Wyoming. It was 70% opposed it, but only 12.4% supported it.
Okay, now was this a push poll or what's the other kind of I know I forget the other name of it, but was this a push poll?
But you're gonna have to tell me what a push poll is.
Well, I think the question is, were the questions neutral or were they suggestive? And
They
push
they
poll would be very suggestive.
they were very neutral for the fact I'm not in this to find out and make an agenda for myself. I want to know what the actual people in my district think. So I wanted it neutral. And this poll was very neutral. Not one time did we mention, bar none, in the poll. It was talking about Wyoming.
Okay.
Was there anything in your poll that suggested that nuclear is bad?
No.
That would make it pretty neutral.
And I have given David permission to put the poll and the poll results on his website. So anybody who's listening to this, if they want to see that this was a neutral poll, they can go onto his website and look if he does post it.
Yeah, I'll go ahead and put it at cowboystatepolitics.com. Representative Knapp, you've been kind of quiet. What are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I have 2 points, I think, because I sit on the Minerals Committee, but it's not just minerals, it's also Economic Development Committee, right? So when we look at this, nuclear energy is a chain. It's a chain of supply, it's a chain of fabrication, manufacturing, the power itself, and then ultimately the waste. So Wyoming can play a role, and I believe it should, in that supply chain. And that is, we have uranium we can mine. We've done that before, and we can continue to do so to in effort, support Trump's defense rebuilding, if it were. And for the AI and data, we can do manufacturing. We have some of the best fabrication in the world. We have fabrication that does work for NASA. However, what we have found is those fabrication companies have bid before on nuclear projects and not been accepted because of either union ties, their qualifications for nuclear, or they're just not big enough. And so we've seen that before, and that is a fear going forward as well. The part that we draw the line on is waste. And I would say that when it comes to the argument or the debate of waste, we actually from the other side get a acknowledgement that waste is a challenge, that there are no necessarily good answers for waste, that technology has been on the energy side of it, but not the waste side of it. So it's not a matter of you start to hear terms like fear mongering, fake facts, those types of things. Boogeyman is a good one that comes up. Those are not debate type of facts that you can necessarily pin down. The facts that we bring are Hanford, a site where they have had $50 billion of cleanup so far. It's projected to be to the year 2100 with a cleanup of over $600 billion estimated. And interesting enough, that cleanup is being done by BWXT, which is a company that is looking at Wyoming. And they have not batted an eye with those figures. They confirm those figures. So all over the country, it's upwards of $1 trillion now that is estimated for sites across the country. So it's not as if we're using facts that don't exist or we're conjecture, providing conjecture. So for me, I've always akined it to going to a car dealership. And if all you hear from is your car sales rep, chances are you're going to leave buying a car. We want the Carfax. So in our committee, we've heard from all the proponents. We've heard from the legislators promoting the bills. We've heard from the lobbyists. We've heard from the companies that want to bring this. They negate the nuclear waste piece. They never answer it. And so we've heard from the NRC about waste. We want to hear from the Texas Attorney General's office. We want to hear from Hanford. We want to hear from those sites that can give us at least an opportunity to have a clear picture, have transparency so that the public can decide, is this something that is worth the risk? because the money that you bring in, even bringing in nuclear waste and storing it, I think the federal government has between 400 and 600 million a year that they spread out over the 90 some sites that are locally storing waste. No matter what you brought in does not equal the billions and billions and billions of dollars it costs if there's cleanup needed. So that's one area of the nuclear chain that we've said that's probably not worth our investment and probably not worth the risk.
All right, now let me ask you kind of an obtuse question, because we started this conversation talking about the assertions that you guys are the new right, that you're some sort of anti-capitalist. So my question is, I would consider all of you guys conservatives. In your mind, how does your conservatism play into your thoughts about nuclear waste, nuclear storage sites, and whomever wants to jump in, go right ahead.
I'll try to answer that, but if I may, at the end, I'd like to come back to finish responding to Ken's comments about racism.
Sure.
And the new right. But my experience is probably a little different because I had a Navy career. As an officer, I was very familiar with the nuclear side of the Navy. I didn't work in that area, but I was very familiar with it. And so I have a level of experience with what I would consider fairly safe nuclear program. I will tell you, I don't trust the federal government to run a both safe and effective or efficient nuclear program. What happened in the Navy is they gave control to one man, and that one man cared enough about the nuclear program in the Navy that he managed it for safety and for efficiency in a very good way. That was Admiral Rickover. And that's just uncommon in the military to allow one person to control an entire program in the military that became huge. I mean, every submarine
Everything now
was nuclear, every aircraft carrier was nuclear, and many destroyers were nuclear under his time. And he selected every single officer that came into that program, had to interview with him. He controlled and kept his thumb on everything from what kind of equipment was purchased to who was operating the equipment. And we just don't have that in the federal government, where the administration has potential changing every 4 years. And, if you're going to keep this stuff safe, you need to keep that kind of thing in mind. And the discussion earlier was about regulation. It's necessary. And so it's going to be heavily regulated, making it cost prohibitive. Now we're talking about a lack of efficiency. It's doomed before it even starts. I like the ideas. I've operated around nuclear quite a bit. I think it can be safe, but it requires something far beyond what our federal government is prepared to do, because right now it's far too political at the federal level. And that's why, we've been building windmills like crazy and solar panels and things that just make no sense in a free market society. So with that, I'd like to, if I may, just go back and talk about the racism issue, because we, the Wyoming Freedom Caucus, get called racist all the time. And so I guess I would start by asking the question, well, whose definition of racist? Because that is changing on a moment by moment basis. But I would ask this question seriously. For which of our good deeds are we being condemned? Because these are the things that they call us racist for, because we support closed borders. Is that racist? We're the only nation that really doesn't have closed borders, and we should. Is it because we want to protect women's spaces from men invading them? I don't think so, and I don't think the people of Wyoming would agree with that being a racist move. Or is it ensuring that only Wyoming citizens vote in Wyoming elections? Those are the kind of things that we believe that those are just common sense things. They're not racist. They apply to every race. But these are the kind of things we're attacked for and labeled as racist. So if Claire McFarland were attempting to call us the new right based on a racist claim, I think we're the furthest thing from that.
Ken?
Yeah, I completely agree, John. I think that was very well said. I just, the things like you mentioned the border. my own sister likes to call me racist because I'm trying to block the border, overlooking the fact that the core of what I'm conservative about is trying to conserve the culture that we have that is rooted in the rule of law and the rule of respect for law. And if we throw those things out, and we've had the discussion, David and I have had several times on the air, then we have nothing. And if there's a problem with the law, fine, let's change the law. Let's make it a little bit easier to work with, a little bit more flexible, whatever it is you think that needs to be done. Let's do that. Let's don't just simply shove the law aside and say it makes no sense. And that's what conservative means to me. We're trying to preserve the culture of the greatest nation on the face of the earth that has led to more prosperity and more freedom, saved more lives, turned more people free than any and everybody else combined.
And I would point out too that as conservatives, one of our main goals is transparency. It allows people to decide once they can see the whole picture. The other side continues to defray that, and that's a good instance is between illegals and immigration. We have an immigration policy in the U.S. It invites up to 2 million people per year to come to America in the right way by applying, by going through the process. And they try to negate that as if we have no immigration policy at all, and that all of this is because of that. It's a continued confusion, whether it's the nuclear debate, by including all nuclear energy into the conversation instead of nuclear waste, which we're dealing with, by talking about spent fuel versus waste. Right now, they're talking about this fuel that can be recycled. Well, TRISO fuel, which is what we're talking about now with both Radiant and BWXT, at this point in time, cannot be recycled effectively and economically. But they like to mix those terms so that it continues to confuse people. That particular fuel also burns at a higher isotope, so it creates it's enriched up to 19.72 versus 2.5 to 5% in normal commercial plants right now. So putting that in a cask that we've always put it in, again, we don't know what's going to happen in 40 years or 50 years or 100 years with that elevated amount of radiation isotope that is bombarding that concrete and steel. So once you start getting into the actual aspects of it and understanding all the different nuances in waste, then you can start to make these decisions. But the more they can create it to be generic and to be anti-capitalist, we're all business owners as well. We see things from a 30,000-foot view. And that's our job as legislators as well, too. We don't want to get bogged down in a bill-to-bill type argument. We want to look at these as policies, understand those policies, understand the dozens of bills that would go with those policies before we just jump into the river and then wonder why we get wet later.
What about you, Bill?
Over this summer, I've been hearing all summer long in both telephone calls and at my town halls that if this comes to bar none, I'm selling my house. Last week I checked. There was one house for sale in bar none. This morning I checked and there's 10. So those people are not just saying stuff, they're meaning it. And we're going to be losing our young kids, and this Radiant has split the community of bar none in half. And I hate to see that.
Fair enough. Well, guys, we've pretty much run out of time. You have any thoughts before we wrap things up? All right. Well, Agent 29?
I'm happy. I want to thank you guys for being on here and doing this on short notice, coming out on a Sunday afternoon, getting this recorded. So thank you guys for everything you do.
Well, guys, I appreciate you taking the time to sit down with us. Make sure you keep me informed how this whole nuclear thing and how many times you're called all sorts of different names.
I would make one comment. There is the upcoming meeting for the Minerals Committee is this Tuesday and Wednesday in Casper, and so I would encourage people to tune in because there will be more discussion, more facts about waste, and I think it's important for people to tune in.
All right. Thanks, guys. Oh, little did he know how much stuff was going to happen in that Minerals Committee. That'll do it for today's installment of Monday Reload. Have a good week, and we'll be back on Wednesday for another incredible installment of the podcast. For now, from the base of the Bighorns at the Cowboy State Politics studio, I'm David Iverson, and this is the one and only Cowboy State Politics.